Welcome to the Digital Responsibility Podcast. There is a vibrant community around the world exploring how we drive forward digital innovation, products and services, and generally exploit technology progression for the sustained benefit of society and the planet. On this podcast, you will hear from me, Christopher Johnson, and Rob Price, two of the original founders of Corporate Digital Responsibility, as we speak to our guests to hear their stories and piece together what it means to be responsible in the digital age. If you'd like to learn more, take a look at the website, corporatedigitalresponsibility.net.
Welcome to episode 4 of the 5th season of Digital Responsibility Podcast, and delighted to be joined today by Iliana, talking about lots of things, including pianos, digital well-being, tech startups, China, and various other things. But Iliana, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you so much, Rob, for having me. As you already mentioned, my name is Iliana. I'm a social entrepreneur and founder of Quiet Social Club, which is a global platform and community to promote individual and organizational and societal well-being in the digital age. And QSC was founded on the belief that in a digital distracted world, we need a new approach to well-being and human flourishing. And so what we do is we translate insights from neuroscience, behavioral science, and psychology into everyday life in the form of educational resources, workshops, campaigns, events, and products as well, in line with Sustainable Development Goal number 3, and also principle 3 of the CDR manifesto. And my journey with this, as you mentioned, I'm a trained concert pianist, but converted to the tech industry after I graduated from Oxford University and Business School later on. And so really my journey with this topic started about 7 years ago. I was at a meditation retreat and kind of by chance or in an involuntary way gave up my phone as part of that. And so that was kind of the first 11 days I spent without my digital devices since first receiving a phone at the age of, I think, 15. And so it was during those 11 days where I realized how my connected lifestyle was really impacting me on a daily basis, my relationships, my well-being, my sense of self, my sleep, my creativity, my, basically everything that makes us human. And at the time I was working in the tech industry, I was working for an education, Sub-Saharan African education platform. And so, there was this incredible moment where I realized I'm working in an industry where digitalization enables us to do amazing things, enables us to reach a lot of people. But at the same time, there's this other side where actually our connected lifestyles are impacting us in a way that might not always be for the better. So I started asking myself, how can we do this in a way where we are promoting well-being, where we're promoting the best of humanity? And so since then, I've been on a search and trying to answer that question in everyday life.
Which is taking you all over the world, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But there are so many things that we need to explore there. So we got to start with the piano. So I mean, the first time that we met, it was this combination of concert pianist, quite a good concert pianist, I suspect, tech advocate, tech startup entrepreneur, and this kind of brilliant thing around thinking about how in this digital connected world where we're bombarded all the time with likes or expectations of likes for every social platform out there, that we're trying to think about how do we help people and find space. But why do I find your name on the Steinway website? Because that's that's not every person who plays the piano kind of happens to have their name on the website of a really kind of big piano manufacturer.
Yeah, well, that is kind of the first community or the first family I joined other than my own that I was born into. I received the Starmer Young Artist Award when I was let me say 16 years old. So that's quite a while ago now. And it was basically to recognize the talent and also the work that you'd already done in the field, well, in the music field. And I started playing the piano at 7, and I spent the majority of my childhood in practice rooms and concert halls and competition halls. And so that receiving that award obviously was an incredible recognition of all the work that I'd put in. And yeah, since then you can see me on the website with a very, a very early attempt at English, because I don't know if you can, I mean, maybe you can hear it a little bit, but English is not my native tongue. I'm originally from Germany. And so this was my very first attempt at writing something poetic about the meaning of Steinway for me, which you can still read up today.
But I'm interested in the link between music and your experience with a piano. A bit in this, last week on the podcast, I talked to the founder of Volleyback clothing business, and I'd said kind of, well, how did you come across that? And it was, well, I was running an ultra marathon across Namibia, and I thought, well, I need to, and it was that link between lived experience and actually kind of wanting to create something, innovate, and find products and solutions that would help to do that. And in a sense, what you're trying to bring to people is an experience that is different, is switching off from that constant barrage of the phone or digital experiences, to take time for themselves. And your time for yourself, I guess, is the music. Is it, or am I jumping to a conclusion that is
I think
not right?
I think that's absolutely correct. I think when it comes to the piano, there are really two things that I would say also translate into what I'm now doing with Quiet Social Club. One is this space to be away from, all the digital noise of our lives. And for me, the piano was always a space to be, a space to listen, a space to just appreciate what was happening in the moment. And there's a beautiful quote which has been attributed to various people, but it basically goes, music is not just the notes, but also the silence between the notes. And I think you can really map that onto life as well. We have this space between the things that happen to us, the space between all the moments where we receive input and information, to make sense of it. And that was, for me, the music, listening for the breaks between the notes, and really, fine-tuning the sound and having fun with that. So that was my space to be, which I'm hoping to recreate. And the other thing really, and this is a word that I think these days a lot more people are familiar with, which is flow. And back when I started, I didn't have a phone that would give me a notification. The piano was something I could absolutely immerse myself in. In fact, it was probably the most stimulating thing I could do at the time. Now it's obviously very different, but what remains is that music, as are many other activities, is an opportunity for us to experience flow, to be in the moment, to practice something that is, really engaging and at the same time a little bit challenging. So we're really here with our full attention, with our presence, with our focus. And I think those are all experiences that I'm carrying into Quiet Social Club, but also into many other daily scenarios. And I consider myself quite lucky. And I think everyone who plays an instrument or who has this sort of flow activity in their life can relate to the meaning and value of that for our digital everyday life.
And I think there's another experience or set of experiences that you bring that are hugely valuable in the work that you're doing now, which is that experience of different cultures, different beliefs and ways of operating around the world, because you've worked in Africa, you've worked in China, you've worked in Europe, you're in the UK at the moment. So tell us a bit more about those experiences and maybe how that has helped in terms of give you insight and understanding about different people reacting to technology, and because I think if we said to people, what does digital well-being mean to you, and maybe that's something I'll ask you shortly, then the answers that people will give will perhaps be quite different as well.
Definitely. Well, I would say that my background in living in different countries and continents, on a personal level, have kind of given me two things. One is humility, and also the realization that listening is often way more important than talking. And this is really how you can, how you can get to know other people, how you can sometimes also get to know yourself. So Africa, obviously, I was working in Kenya, where you went straight from having no banking to having M-Pesa, which is a mobile banking system that really, basically it was just a leapfrog situation from having nothing to suddenly everyone being on their phone. So digitalization in different continents means totally different things as well. And in China, you have a very, very digitalized society, and actually it's very much ingrained in the fabric of society. I think when I was living there, something that always amazed me was just how natural it seemed to feel to people to have their devices out all the time. So obviously observing that for me was also inspiration to start Quiet Social Club. The idea was really fine-tuned in China. This is where I gave my first talks about the subject, and there was really a lot of interest, especially into how this is impacting. I think China's really done a lot of education on how too much gaming, too much social media is impacting your mental health. So I've kind of taken a lot of inspiration from all over the world in the approach that I'm now taking with Quiet Social Club.
So let's go to that point of what is digital well-being. And I mean, certainly in the principle as we've defined it in the CDR framework, as you mentioned earlier, we try to kind of talk about it in the context of physical as well as mental well-being, but also to kind of closely link it with some of the kind of digital maturity side as well, in terms of people's understanding of technology and how it can help them. What does digital well-being mean for you and for the organizations that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because just last week I was researching a little bit more about, how different people define digital well-being. And when you really look into it, there's so many different definitions for digital well-being. For me personally, and I think this is obviously something that translates to Quiet Social Club, it's really for a person to feel like they're living and working well and connecting with others in a meaningful way. And so I think digital well-being has so many facets to it. So this is perhaps one of the best ways to summarize it without going into too much depth. But for me, digital well-being is also kind of reaching a state where we're kind of counteracting the negative that our digital technologies and our digital devices, basically the negative symptoms of using them, like, for example, impacting empathy, like impacting focus, like impacting cognitive functions. So for me, digital well-being is, of course, in a proactive, positive way. It's about empowering people to live and work and come together well in a digital society. But it's also about having the tools and the knowledge on how to navigate the challenges that our digital lives present us with, like I mentioned previously. So in a daily context, I often talk about digital balance, and the companies that we work with. I think we're still at a stage now where this is something we can use, digital balance, because we're still kind of like at a stage and at a moment in time where I think the offline and the online are still somewhat in a way that we can feel the difference. But obviously now with Gen Z and the next generations will not maybe use the term balance anymore. So it's definitely an interesting time to find one definition for the term, but this is what it means to me.
And I think you touched on a really important point, that Certainly in previous conversations on the podcast, we looked, I think season 2, Bob Wigley came and talked about his book, Born Digital. So he had interviewed 200 Gen Z entrepreneurs. And actually a lot of that was around this constant disruption, the constantly looking at devices, and who's to say that's right or wrong? In his conversation, it would be easy for Bob or myself as my generation to look at that and say, well, surely you can't concentrate. How can you focus on a task when you're constantly juggling? But if my son was on the call, no doubt he would argue differently, in the sense that he can multitask and he can do 53 different things at the same time. So do you find a difference, in a generational difference, in the conversations that you have with people, with organizations, around what's right and wrong? Is there a right and wrong, or is it actually being, to go back to your point, being aware of, conscious awareness of it, and maybe then tools or mechanisms that enable you, where appropriate, to kind of think about things differently?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if, as you said, I'm not sure that there is a right and wrong. We're living at a time where we're actually living at a very unique time, where we have people who were born in the 1940s and people who were born, a couple of years ago, all living together. So we have this whole spectrum of experiences and perspectives when it comes to digital technologies, that are coming together and trying to figure out what the best way is. Obviously, someone who is not using online banking might have a very different view and experience to someone who grew up with social media every day. I find it quite interesting, and this is, there are a lot of organizations, youth-led organizations, that have emerged in recent years that are saying, okay, we were born into this world and we didn't necessarily have a say in what it looked like. And to be honest, they feel that they should have had a say, or they want to have a say. So they are creating these platforms. And I'm thinking of, Responsible Tech Hub by the Technical University of Munich, or the Log Off movement in the US. There's a lot of student-led movements that are trying to basically bring their perspective to the table. And when it comes to right and wrong, I feel that everyone has some sort of experience where they would say, this is where my digital technologies, my digital devices are impacting my life in a positive way, and this is where they're impacting me in a negative way. Someone might say, I feel like I cannot focus. Whereas someone might say, my parents are never present for me mentally when I'm trying to speak to them because they're checking something on their phone. So I feel everyone has their own story that they bring to the table, with their own experience of, this is where technology has really enabled me to achieve great things. For example, education, career opportunities, and also connection. You and I connected via LinkedIn first. And then they also have the opposite, where they say, this is moments where I don't feel well about technology in this area of my life. And I think this applies to all generations, really. Even, someone who was born with social media might sometimes say, they might, and I've heard this from a couple of, girls and boys who are 18 years old, they might say, I have a lot of friends who spend 7 hours on TikTok. And I feel like sometimes they feel, maybe it's too much, maybe it's not too much, but there's definitely an awareness for, okay, I'm spending a lot less time on social media than my peers, and this is impacting me in such and such way.
Yeah, and my biggest worry there is, you've clearly spoken to my kids, because kind of they would undoubtedly say, Dad's on his phone again, kind of is never there to talk to us.
Well, that's why you have the pouch now.
Yes. Well, let's go there. Let's talk about Quiet Social Club. So how do you help organizations, and how do you help people think about digital well-being, and what are some of the tools or the products that you provide for them?
Yeah, so based on my personal experience, for founding Quiet Social Club, it was really about, having the education and the awareness part. So a lot of it is about, going for talks and talking about the impact of our digital lives on mental, social, emotional, physical well-being. But it's really also a lot about going into the experience and having this aha moment, because I think there's one thing: education offers us all this information, and we can read up a lot about this, about the science behind it. But when we go into this experience of, this is how I feel when I'm taking a break, and when my creativity is coming back, when I actually feel like I have a space in my mind, or I actually have one more hour today to fill because I got this stuff done more quickly. This is really what it is about. And so whether it is the workshops, whether it is, short lunch talks, or whether it is events, the goal is always to enable people to have this experience where they find themselves with a new perspective, and not in a, oh my God, I feel like there's nothing I can do about this, I feel like I'm a victim to technology, but really in a way of empowering them with the tools and products and knowledge to find a better digital balance in their daily lives. And as you mentioned, or as I mentioned, the pouch is one of them. It's a Faraday cage that basically blocks all signal from your phone. So it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And what it's really based on is, a lot of scientific studies that show that just seeing our phone basically makes us want to touch it. And because our brains are plastic, obviously these behavioral loops they manifest themselves a lot more quickly than we think, and they're sometimes a little harder to break than we hope or want. And so the pouch was just one of the tools, and it is something that we add to the workshops and then we add to the talks and to the events to enable people to take this into their daily lives and to practice it without necessarily needing to think about it. And so that's it in a nutshell.
And I guess that must be quite an emotive experience, because my phone broke a few months ago, and I was without a phone for a whole day, and it was traumatic. It was my go-to thing. It was my information source. It was my connection with the world. So actually making you think about that connectivity, it does it brings about self-reflection, doesn't it, about that dependency. And of course, the other thing is, it's not just the phone being there. The apps that we have on it, many of them are geared towards actually driving you constantly to check. It's business models that are based around screen time and therefore drawing you back, or games that are specifically designed to continue to engage. So without sharing anything that's not, we shouldn't share, how do people react to that experience when you're working with them in a workshop, or when there is that moment of realization of, God, I am so dependent on it, take time out? How have people reacted?
Well, first of all, I think you'd be surprised how many people come to the workshops already knowing that they're somewhat dependent on technology. Going back to your experience of the phone breaking, the beautiful thing about this is obviously that it is a choice that people have, and they make a proactive, and they make a choice when they use these products. They make a choice when they engage with the content. And I think this is really probably the most important aspect about this. It's not that something is being taken away, but rather it's someone investing in something, which is more time, which is more space in your mind. You were talking about notifications. On average, we receive and check our email every couple of minutes. Then there's studies by incredible researchers like Gloria Mark that have shown that it can take up to 23 minutes to refocus your attention again. So, it is a feeling, but it's also science, just reducing the amount of distractions we have in our environment and taking back that control over our attention and over the space in our mind. I think that is really quite empowering. This is how people, this is luckily and, you know, wonderfully also the feedback that we get. It's interesting the different types of scenarios that people are using the pouch in. One is, you know, for example, during the night, and then not grabbing the phone first thing in the morning. And so, you know, someone might have never thought about, this is how I want to start my day, but just by using something like this, they had this moment in the morning where they thought, okay, I'm not grabbing my phone. Actually, I have a minute to think. Actually, I have a minute for myself. And I have a minute to think about what I want to make out of today. So, you know, it's basically little moments like these, or, you know, when you're working, that you make an active and conscious commitment to being distraction free, and that you really enjoy this peace and quiet that comes from, you know, silencing notifications. And yeah, obviously it goes beyond the pouch. There's I mean, with the pouch comes a little booklet, but there's also a lot of educational resources. And we also do workshops for individuals where we, you know, we really look at, okay, how can I design an environment, or how can I design a day that promotes digital well-being, that promotes, yeah, just having a good day in a very distracted world.
And I'm guessing, I mean, I've seen it with CDR, that people almost respond with, well, yeah, I kind of knew, but you've really made me think about what I actually do. And even in this conversation, I'm now feeling bad about my first meeting of the day when I met an ex-colleague and we were chatting, and I must have kept looking at my phone because I'd put a post on LinkedIn and I was waiting to see, has anyone responded? And he's probably sat there thinking, did you come to talk to me or just look at your phone? So there's almost a respect thing in terms of the way that you engage with other people as well, isn't there? It's not just about personal well-being from a digital point of view. It's actually relationships and engagement.
Yeah, I mean, it's the things that make up the fabric of our society, you know, and we as individuals, we make up as a society. So but it's interesting that you mentioned that, because a call earlier that I had was about phubbing, which is exactly this, which is when someone is not present because they're looking at their phone. And yeah, I introduced a no phone policy at the table a very long time ago. And so this has worked well for my friends and my family, and also, you know, in work settings, because at the end of the day, there is a lot of research that is showing now how the presence of our phones are affecting our attention. It's basically this divided attention, because we, as you said, could constantly be receiving something online that might be more interesting than the person in front of us. And I think this is also another really important thing to address when we speak about our digital lives. Online, everything is fancy and stimulating, and, you know, in a way, even sometimes a little bit more glamorous than life here. And we need to remember that when we go online, because it is possible to just Photoshop everything. It is possible to edit every single message. It is possible to think about what you're saying. So it is a very different world to the little messy, chaotic, and sometimes not so glamorous, and sometimes a little bit challenging, you know, analog world we live in, where relationships are not as easy as alike, but they require attention, attentive listening. They require, you know, compassion and the desire to want to build relationships.
And I think one of the things that I find fascinating, and the conversation illustrates perfectly, is that navigating this digital world, this digital society, as you said earlier, it requires to kind of bring together lots of different perspectives. So it's not just about having a bunch of technologists like me in a room. It's about people with different lived backgrounds coming together to kind of find, to use your phrase earlier, balance, digital balance, around the way in which we use them. Because undoubtedly, there are some amazing things. I mean, you used a great example earlier with the leap in Kenya around banking, which, I mean, well talked about. We've talked about it before on the podcast. So these technologies can do amazing things, and it's just being a little more conscious of the impacts, and at the same time then enabling us to focus on how do we kind of achieve things, utilizing them as accelerators, augmenters, facilitators of those things that we're trying to achieve. So I mean, I obviously kind of when we first spoke about this, I loved your work and what you were doing, and very keen to bring you into the CDR community, and of course you're very familiar with it from coming from Germany, because of course that is so much the heartland of CDR and the work that's happening globally. And I guess to finish with, what would be your hopes in terms of moving to the UK? You've moved to the UK again. You've been here kind of many times in the past. For all those people listening, whether in the UK or whether elsewhere, what would you love them to do next week, the week after? Whether just listening to this conversation and thinking, I'm going to do that differently, or indeed kind of picking up the phone or contacting you on LinkedIn, what would be your kind of 2-3 tips and hopes for people listening to this podcast now?
Wow. I will have to think about that for a second, but I think the first one definitely is please get in touch. I always love to chat about these topics and also get to know people who are interested in talking about, just living well in a digital world. I think what I would love to leave with our listeners, and it's kind of funny because you just spoke about this, try and, really just explore being with other people, being in a social context without your phones, because I think, human connection is one of the most precious things we have, and we need to be attentive to each other. We need to be present for each other in order to solve the challenges that we're facing as a society. So I think what I would love everyone to try out is, whether it's with family, whether it's with colleagues, whether it's with friends, or even just in a setting where you're alone, but to just go without the phone and see how differently the conversation goes, how differently it goes when you ask a follow-up question, or just really show your opposite that you're completely present for them, and just see how that goes and how that maybe changes the relationship even.
Fantastic. And my final question, next concert, have you got anything planned?
I'll keep you posted.
And I'm guessing that people aren't allowed to turn up with their phones, kind of waving them with the lights, kind of, or is that okay? Is that an okay?
We are trying to. So I play 4 hands these days, mostly with my duo partner Iliana, and you can also find some of our music on our website. And but we're trying to have a really completely present moment experience with our concerts. So whether that is enforced in speech marks through the pouch, we're not sure yet, but it will definitely be what we want to also empower people to do, is take a moment out of their days of connectivity and really connect to themselves again, and connect to the music, and share this experience together. And I think a lot of musicians, a lot of artists feel the same way. They it's a very it's a holy moment to appreciate this together. So
yes. And then it was my personal pandemic promise, was to go and see more live music, which I have absolutely been doing over the last 2 years. But of course, very conscious that we all stand there with our phones, or sit there with our phones taking pictures and recording, and it does it's a different experience. Look, Iliana, it's been brilliant to talk to you. Thank you for sharing everything that you're doing with everyone who's listening, and look forward to further conversations downstream around this focus around digital well-being, and clearly kind of strong relationship with CDR. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob. It was a real pleasure.